History in the Holy Land. The U.S. opens its new embassy in Jerusalem amid deadly violence along the Gaza border. Protecting conscience rights. The governor of Oklahoma signs a bill in favor of Catholic adoption agencies. Crisis in Chile. Ahead of their meeting with Pope Francis, the country's bishops are under mounting pressure to address another sex scandal. And climb every mountain. An Australian man in his quest to climb the highest peaks on 7 continents. On EWTN News Nightly for Monday, May 14th, 2018. President Trump calls it a great day for Israel. He sends his best wishes during a festive inauguration of the new embassy in Jerusalem. But violence along the Gaza border, fueled in part by the embassy move, cast a shadow on the opening. More than 50 Palestinians were killed in mass protests, marking the deadliest day there since 2014. Good evening from Washington, D.C. Thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Amid the clashes, President Trump says America remains fully committed to striking a peace deal in the Middle East. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu applauds the president's decision to move the embassy to Jerusalem, but Palestinians are outraged. They claim the eastern half of Jerusalem as their own capital, and even the Pope has expressed concern. President Trump sent a U.S. delegation to Jerusalem to mark the occasion.
We welcome you officially and for the first time to the Embassy of the United States here in Jerusalem.
White House advisor Ivanka Trump sharing the view of her father, who sent a video message today.
For many years, we failed to acknowledge the obvious, the plain reality that Israel's capital is Jerusalem.
The embassy opens less than 50 miles away from deadly clashes raging on the Gaza border today. But the president's senior advisor and son-in-law, Jared Kushner, is optimistic a framework for peace between Israelis and Palestinians has been laid.
When there is peace in this region, we will look back upon this day and remember that the journey to peace started with a strong America recognizing the truth.
But Palestinians have lashed out. Led by their leader Mahmoud Abbas, they have declared the Trump administration unfit to mediate peace talks.
Il mio pensiero va ora a Gerusalemme.
Last year, Pope Francis expressed his own concerns that the decision to move the embassy could destabilize the Middle East.
The Vatican has reservations about the peace of Jerusalem.
Chad Pecknold, a professor of theology at the Catholic University of America, explains the Vatican's position.
They have prudential concerns about any small change in the status quo leading to greater violence, and of course we saw some of that today.
Pecknold says it's too simple to pin today's violence only on the embassy opening. Palestinians are also protesting because today marks the 70th anniversary of the establishment of the State of Israel, when hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were displaced, they fled, or were expelled from what is now Israel. Lauren?
Mark, what is the White House saying about these attacks on the Gaza border?
The White House says the responsibility for the dozens of deaths rests squarely with Hamas. Hamas is a Palestinian Islamic militant group which the U.S. recognizes as a terrorist organization. In the White House press briefing today, spokesman Raj Shah said Israel has the right to defend itself. Lauren?
White House correspondent Mark Irons, thank you. The White House says First Lady Melania Trump underwent a medical procedure this morning to treat a benign kidney condition. The process was successful and there were no complications. Mrs. Trump will remain in the hospital for the next few days and looks forward to a full recovery. The White House says the aide who dismissed Senator John McCain's opposition on President Donald Trump's CIA nominee by saying he's dying anyway has been dealt with internally. White House Deputy Spokesman Raj Shah says White House communications aide Kelly Sadler still remains in her position following that comment during a closed-door meeting last week. The 81-year-old McCain is battling brain cancer. Sadler called McCain's daughter Megan to apologize, but hasn't done so publicly. Catholic bishops of Oklahoma praised the state's governor for signing a bill to protect faith-based adoption agencies. But the move has angered gay rights groups who say it's discriminatory. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi has more. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. The law says private adoption or foster care agencies do not have to go against their beliefs when placing children. For example, a Catholic agency does not have to place a child with a same-sex couple. Governor Mary Fallin finally signed the bill Friday, and tonight Catholics say it's a win for religious freedom.
It was a bill that protected faith-based agencies against discrimination, which is what we've seen across the country with a number of lawsuits that have been filed against various Catholic charity entities. This was a very preemptive measure to prevent some of those lawsuits and threats of lawsuits coming to Oklahoma.
The Family Equality Council, a national gay rights group, says the law is discriminatory. Catholic Director Brett Farley of the Catholic Conference of Oklahoma disagrees, saying the new Oklahoma law safeguards a basic right. The law goes into effect in November. Governor Fallin plans to create a list of adoption agencies that will serve any eligible person. But one state-based LGBT group, Freedom Oklahoma, is already threatening to sue. Now, in Kansas, Governor Jeff Kier has a similar bill on his desk. Lauren?
I understand Congress is also considering a bill to protect faith-based adoption agencies. What is that status?
That's right, Lauren. The Child Welfare Provider Inclusion Act would protect faith-based adoption across the country. The U.S. Bishops' Conference, Catholic Charities USA, and other religious groups are urging the House Ways and Means Committee chairman to move it forward. The bill is right now sitting in that committee.
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi. Thank you, Jason. Bishops from Chile will begin talks with Pope Francis tomorrow at the Vatican. He summoned them to Rome to address their role in covering up sexual abuse by priests. At the Vatican press office today, spokesmen for the bishops say they are focused on renewing the church. The Vatican has said there were grave omissions in caring for victims. Vatican correspondent Juliet Lindley joins us from Rome. Juliet, you were at the press conference today. What can we expect from these meetings?
Well, Lauren, Francis will be meeting 31 active and 2 retired Chilean bishops this week, and the Vatican says the Holy Father feels the need to do an in-depth examination of the causes and consequences of the multiple incidents of sex abuse and abuses of power in Chile. Now, he also wants to examine the mechanisms that led to some cases of cover-up. So it seems like the bishops will have to explain their actions. And in a harsh statement, the Vatican said over the weekend that Pope Francis wants to discern responsibilities for the crisis and map changes in the Chilean church to prevent these, what he called devastating wounds, from recurring.
You asked the bishops, Juliet, today whether they would ask the victims of abuse for forgiveness, just like Pope Francis did last week. What did they say?
Yeah, indeed. Monsignor Fernando Ramos told me that they need to beg forgiveness 70 times, 7 times, as the gospel says. And the other bishop emphasized feelings of pain and shame with regard to the victims of sex abuse in their country. And there was an emphasis that they are here to listen to Pope Francis and to map out the path that lies ahead when it comes to the renewal of their church in Chile.
Juliet, Pope Francis has admitted to grave errors in judgment in this sex abuse scandal in Chile, especially concerning Bishop Juan Barros, who is accused of covering up abuse. Is there any indication that Bishop Barros will be asked to resign?
Well, that was one of the questions put to the bishops during the press conference, and the answer was clear, that it's only the Holy Father who can make the decision to ask a bishop to step aside, and we don't know what the Pope's intentions are this week, so anything else would be just pure speculation. Now, the focus is very much on the need to discern together everyone's responsibility and to make changes that will avoid clergy sex abuse happening again.
2 weeks ago, 3 sex abuse victims from Chile visited privately with the Pope in the Vatican. How does that visit compare to this week's meetings with the bishops?
Well, those survivors were welcomed very warmly by the Pope. They stayed at his private residence, Santa Marta, and had many private talks and discussions with him. The bishops, on the other hand, are staying outside the Vatican at a residence for priests and tourists, and they're getting no VIP treatment. They'll meet the Pope for talks in a side room of the large Aula Paolo VI. So it's an extremely impersonal venue, Lauren. So that's very telling.
Juliette Lindley, EWTN News Nightly Vatican correspondent. Thank you for covering this.
Thank you, Lauren.
The head of the UN praises North Korea's decision to close its only known nuclear test site. Journalists will be able to watch the event. It will happen in less than 2 weeks. And it comes ahead of the U.S.-North Korean summit next month in Singapore. President Trump calls it a gracious gesture. Pope Francis is praying for the victims of a series of deadly attacks on 3 churches in Indonesia. At least 13 people died in the suicide bombings. At least 41 were injured. Santa Maria Catholic Church was one of the churches targeted. A family with 2 young children is believed to have carried out the attacks. ISIS has claimed responsibility. And ISIS also says it's responsible for a knife attack in Paris over the weekend. A 20-year-old man who attacked passers-by killed 1 person and injured 4 others. French authorities say the suspect was on a terror watch list. Police are questioning his family and friends. He was killed by police. In Iraq, a populist coalition organized by an influential Shiite cleric emerges as the early front-runner. It's Iraq's first national election since its victory over ISIS. Partial returns from Saturday's balloting were announced today. For the first time, voting was done electronically. At least 45 people, including 20 children, are dead after a dam bursts in Kenya. Heavy rains caused the disaster. It was the latest accident due to rainfall. The weather has caused more than 160 deaths since March. Hundreds of mourners gather in Liverpool to say goodbye to British toddler Alfie Evans. Alfie's parents fought an unsuccessful legal battle to keep him on life support. The case sparked an international debate on medical ethics and received the attention of Pope Francis. A private family funeral was held today. Alfie died last month, just a month shy of his 2nd birthday. Coming up, it's graduation time. We take a look at commencement speakers at Catholic colleges. And the Holy Father says Jesus wants to be friends with you. Iowa is tweaking its state-funded family planning program. It denies money to abortion providers like Planned Parenthood. But hospitals and clinics can now receive funding provided they do not perform abortions. Archbishop Jose Gomez of Los Angeles tells new graduates the American dream began long before the time of the founding fathers.
200 years earlier, migrant missionaries were getting the native peoples of the Southwest as brothers and sisters, from Florida to California, sharing with them the most precious gift they could imagine, the gift of knowing the living God.
Gomez made the comments during his commencement address at the Catholic University of America this Saturday in Washington, D.C. Our next guest says the Archbishop is a good choice for a Catholic school's graduation, but that not every college chooses well. Patrick Riley is Executive Director of the Cardinal Newman Society. That's a group that promotes and defends faithful Catholic education. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Archbishop Gomez is on the good list. Let's take a look at some of the other universities that made poor choices. Right here you have a commencement speaker who publicly opposes the church's moral teaching, and that is Fordham University's Dennis Walcott, who is the former New York City Schools Chancellor. Loyola, Illinois had Sister Simone Campbell. She's pro-choice and pro-women priests. Have some Catholic colleges lost their way?
Well, it certainly seems that way. You know, the message that is sent by the choice of a commencement speaker can say very much about the values and the priorities of an institution. We love when we see many of these good, faithful colleges inviting the bishops to speak at their commencement and showing, you know, what their priorities are. And the bishops certainly don't get a lot of good attention these days from the media, so it's great when these schools do this.
They do here.
That's right. Well, that's good. And then on the other hand, you have these institutions, many of them year after year, it's the same thing. The numbers have declined. It used to be far more problems at commencement time. But there are institutions that just year after year keep picking these same types of people.
Fordham University, Ronan Farrow, the journalist who broke the story about the Me Too movement, he spoke at Loyola Marymount University, a Jesuit university in Los Angeles. Let's take a listen to what he says. Now, Farrow wasn't on your list.
More than ever, we need people to be guided by their own senses of principle, and not the whims of a culture that prizes ambition and sensationalism and celebrity and vulgarity and doing whatever it takes to win.
He said that they should be guided by their own senses of principle. What about using God as a guide?
Well, that's where principle comes from, right? Principle means nothing if it's not grounded in divine morality, right? Farrow is a perfect example of where these colleges face real serious decisions about whom to honor, and he's an example of someone who clearly has some bias in his reporting that would not be very favorable to the church on issues like same-sex marriage and other things. Why, out of all the available people to select, was he selected? Now, he also is not on our list because he's not very publicly come out and said, I dissent, I oppose the church on these issues. But, it does raise serious questions about what is the purpose of selecting a commencement speaker and what is the message we're trying to send to our families?
My son will be headed to Loyola Marymount in the fall.
Okay.
Betsy DeVos, Secretary of Education, spoke at Ave Maria University in Florida. I've also spoken there, and a group of alumni protested this choice, citing rollbacks that she made to programs protecting civil rights and the disabled. So what should colleges do about high-profile and political speeches? You say that, there are tons of choices out there.
That's right. There are so many good choices, and so we don't need to get too controversial. Now, in the case of Betsy DeVos, it was a very small number of people who protested, and I think she was an excellent choice. Her commencement speech was very pro-Catholic, very pro all the values that the university embodies, and there's no evidence of her contradicting that in her public life in any way.
Let's take a look at the Newman Guide. We've got a picture of it right here. It's a reference, and it profiles faithful Catholic colleges. Some of the speakers whom you have identified as poor choices at colleges are recommended or not recommended by the Newman Guide, and some of them, can they rehabilitate? Can they make it off of that list?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, one of the model institutions that we have today, Franciscan University of America, of Steubenville, was not very strongly Catholic. Catholic University of America went through a rough period. These institutions have reformed under very strong leadership.
So if you have poor choices one year and you get the better choices next year, and this guide isn't just talking about commencement speakers, it also gives a lot more information about the types of Catholic colleges they are. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
Patrick
you.
Riley, Executive Director of the Cardinal Newman Society. The first African-American Catholic priest in the U.S. is one step closer to sainthood. The Vatican has cleared the way for Father Augustus Tolton's canonization process to continue. Father Tolton was born into slavery in Missouri in 1854. He would be the first African-American saint. Our sister Spanish publication, Así Prensa, reports that a Chilean Catholic priest and nun, who are twins, began their journey together to religious life when they were 3 months old. In 1974, Father Christian Moya and Sister Monica Moya were on the verge of death with pneumonia, but their mother consecrated them to the Virgin Mary, and they recovered. Both joined religious life. Here you can see Sister Monica taking her final vows. She considers her vocation a gift and a miracle. Up next, pro-lifers rally in Ireland ahead of the country's vote on an abortion referendum. And a mountain climber makes it to the top of the record books.
Lui continua a dire amico.
Ti aspetto.
Pope Francis says it's our destiny to be friends with Jesus. The Holy Father says our relationship with Christ is not by chance. Instead, he calls all of us his allies, even Judas, his betrayer. The Irish Times reports today that more than 1,000 doctors in Ireland are in favor of repealing the country's ban on abortion. They say it will make healthcare, quote, safe and regulated for women. Ireland will vote later this month on whether to repeal the abortion ban. Joining us now is Tracy Harkin with EWTN Ireland. Tracy, what's the atmosphere like in Dublin?
Well, it's been an amazing day today in Dublin City Centre for what has been the last pro-life demonstration before the voters go to the polls in just 2 weeks' time. We have young people, many families that have come out in force again today, and we have an amazing lineup of speakers.
Tracy, you were telling us last week that Facebook had banned international advertising on the referendum. How is this news being received?
Yes, Lauren, it's been quite a dramatic week with a number of important developments. It has further transpired from the Facebook, which has banned the foreign adverts coming into the country, that now Google has banned all adverts. And this has been met with huge opposition and concern from pro-life leaders. Indeed, there was a major press conference held this week with pro-life leaders describing the Google decision as scandalous and an attempt to rig the referendum. They've said that this is completely unacceptable and it brings the conduct of what had previously been a fairly civil campaign into disrepute at this important time.
Several prominent medical professionals and other leaders issued statements. Tell us about those.
Yes, just this week we've had statements coming out from over 200 lawyers and some former judges among this group saying that the current legislation that is being proposed by the Irish government, if this referendum goes through, will be unrestricted abortion up to 6 months. And this is very important clarity on this particular issue. Another important intervention this week has been from Ireland's top 5 obstetricians and gynecologists, which have come out highly critical of the Together for Yes campaign, in particular 2 prominent pro-choice doctors who have really contested the fact that what they're saying is that in their decades of experience, the current legislation in no way prevents doctors from delivering optimal maternal health care. And this has been a hugely important point of clarity, and hopefully this message will get through to the Irish voters.
How do pro-life leaders think it's going to go on referendum day, May 25th?
I think, Lauren, there's cautious optimism. It's just 2 weeks to go to voting day, and people are cautiously optimistic. There's been an awful lot of prayer said on the ground. The bishops have been fantastic in terms of leading the way, calling for prayer, calling for people to reflect very carefully before they go to the polls on the 25th of May. And the pro-life leaders are very hopeful that at this weekend in particular, the faithful will be encouraged to keep up the prayer and to go out in force and vote no in 2 weeks' time.
EWTN contributor Tracy Harkin, thank you.
Thank you, Lauren.
And finally tonight, a mountaineer from Australia has had a busy few months. He's climbed the highest peaks on all 7 continents in record time. Steve Plain, originally from Perth, finished his 117-day journey today by scaling Mount Everest. A surfing accident in 2014 left him with a broken neck, but he recovered from that and continued mountain climbing. These trips raised money for charity. It makes me just tired thinking about it. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Let's keep in touch online. Follow me at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter and Lauren Ashburn EWTN on Facebook. Before we go, though, congratulations are in order for baby Leo, the son of our associate producer, Jessica Marquez. Leo was baptized over the weekend here in Washington, and this is a picture of him. Look how cute he is, with his parents, Jessica and Roberto, godparents, Jennifer and Victor, and our nightly news producer, Rodney. That's not Rodney, that's Leo. Welcome to the faith, Leo. Good night, and God bless you.